know about you guys, but it's 2025 and Kat and I have been spending a lot of time reminiscing and reliving moments that are precious to us. And one of my favorites, Kat brought up, and I told her, you have to share this story. You have to share this story.
I mean, it's not a big deal. It was just there, when we lived in Maine, I encountered some turkeys and,
Wild turkeys.
they were domestic turkeys.
You're saying that these turkeys belonged to somebody, like they had them on a farm and they got out?
Yes.
Okay, I thought you were talking about wild turkeys because there were plenty of those around there.
Well, yeah, no, they were domesticated turkeys. They were cute little guys, and apparently they get out often. And I was driving along, and there were 3 turkeys in the road, and I tried to get them in the back of the car, but only one would get in. And so I didn't want to leave the other ones and take just the one. I didn't want it to be like a scary experience. So I drove to someone's house and I was like, do you know what the deal is with these turkeys? And she was like, yeah, they're out all the time. There used to be 4. I don't know what happened to the other one. And I'm like, well, what do you think happened to the other one?
Yeah.
They're just in the road.
Okay. Well, now that I know they were domesticated, I feel a little bit more comfortable with that story, because I was envisioning you trying to herd a gaggle, or I don't even know what you would call a flock of turkeys. A flock? What's the okay? Yeah, trying to shoo them into the back of your Nissan Rogue.
No, I mean, I like any animal, I felt it was in danger and I wanted to help it, but I didn't. I mean,
No.
I herded them. I did this. Yeah. Yeah, back to their house, which the lady had pointed me in the direction of, and they got back there. It was fine.
Did you have trouble getting that one turkey out of the back of your Nissan?
No. Once he realized, or she, I don't know, I'm not that great with turkeys, that the rest of the rafter was making its way back to the house. It was quick to dismount the road.
Rafter? Is that what a bunch of turkeys are called?
Yes, a rafter or a flock. I looked it up.
Okay. Oh, very good.
Again, I don't know that much about turkeys.
Obviously, or you would have gotten them all in the back of your Nissan
I know.
Rogue.
I feel like such an idiot.
Well, I have a story for you.
Okay.
And I hope you're ready for this. Are you ready for this? You better be, because I'm starting it now. Who doesn't love a good message in a bottle story? For centuries, messages in bottles have carried humanity's thoughts and pleas and farewells across the waves, connecting people across time and space. Often cast adrift during moments of desperation, these bottled notes offer glimpses, sometimes haunting ones, into the lives of those who sent them. Their words preserved in these little tiny time capsules. And you know how much I love a time capsule.
It's true.
I think this is why messages in bottles have always really kind of intrigued me, because they could be very, very old. And in many cases they are. We'll get into that. The first thing I think of is, were there any messages in bottles that were thrown from the Titanic? And the answer is yes.
Really?
The Titanic, of course, struck an iceberg on its maiden voyage in 1912. And of course, this caused all kinds of chaos and tragedy. The unsinkable ship began to sink. And amidst the panic, a young man from Ireland named Jeremiah Burke, who was traveling to Boston to start a new life, managed a final act of farewell. Just before departing Ireland, Jeremiah's mother had gifted him a small bottle of holy water. In his last moments, he used that bottle to send the message to the world, scribbling in brief, this heartbreaking note. Quote, "From Titanic, goodbye all, Burke of Glenmire, Cork." He sealed it inside the bottle, tossed it into the icy Atlantic, and Jeremiah and his cousin sadly perished that night on the Titanic. But remarkably, the bottle washed ashore a year later, just less than a mile from his family home in Ireland.
My gosh, that's incredible.
What are the odds of that? Because they say that so much of the debris and bodies washed into Nova Scotia Bay in Canada. How this one made it all the way back to Ireland and land pretty much, on the beach next to his family's houses. Hard to understand, hard to comprehend.
And being in that place mentally, in those moments is just beyond me. Like the last thing I would be thinking is like, maybe I should get a note out to someone.
I know. Here's an even better example of just what you're saying from the Lusitania. 3 years after the Titanic disaster, the Lusitania, which was a luxury liner as well, it met a similarly tragic fate during World War I. In May of 1915, the ship was struck by a German torpedo off the coast of Ireland, sinking in just 18 minutes. More than 1,000 people lost their lives, with only around 700 surviving. Among the passengers was an unknown individual who, in the chaos of those final moments, managed to scribble this message. The note was then cast into the sea in a bottle. It read, quote, "Still on deck with a few people. The last boats have left. We are sinking fast. Some men near me are praying with a priest. The end is near. Maybe this note will..." And that's the end of it. The unfinished sentence.
Stop.
Conveys the desperation and inevitability of the moment, though we don't know who wrote the note or if they survived or what, but it suggests that he didn't have time to finish that sentence.
Yeah.
Cram it in the bottle and throw it in the ocean.
That's terribly sad.
Well, I understand that. And that's why I'm going to tell you a story that has a far happier ending.
Okay.
It's one of those incredible tales that feels almost too good to be true. It starts back in December of 1979. Dorothy and John Peckham were on a Christmas cruise in Hawaii. The ship was decked out with holiday lights. The air was warm. It was festive. Everybody on board was in high spirits. And as part of the fun, it's a bit of a tradition.
Yeah.
Passengers were invited to write notes and stick them in empty champagne bottles and toss them into the ocean. Now, they don't do that these days.
No, it's littering and it's terrible.
But Dorothy said, why not? So she wrote a note. She added their names and their address in Los Angeles, and for good measure, tucked in a dollar bill just in case anybody who found it wanted to send a reply. Then she tossed the bottle into the Pacific and watched it float away, not really expecting anything to come out of it. With that small gesture, it set off a chain of events that would stretch across continents and change lives in ways nobody could have ever imagined. So this was 1979. Fast forward to March 1983, which happened to be John's 70th birthday. And that's when they got a letter that completely floored them. It was from a man named Ho Van Nhang, who had been a soldier in the South Vietnamese army. And he and his younger brother had been fleeing Vietnam in a tiny riverboat made out of reeds, packed with other refugees trying to escape the communist regime. Again, when she threw this into the ocean, it was 1979 and the Vietnam War had only been over for a few years, and a lot of refugees were trying to get the hell out. They're out there in this tiny rickety reed boat in the Gulf of Thailand. They're exhausted, they're desperate, they're parched, and hopeless. But then, Ho spotted something floating in the water. It was a bottle, and at first he thought, maybe it's water, because they were parched. They desperately needed it. But when he pulled it out and opened it, he found Dorothy's note and that dollar bill inside. In the middle of such chaos, this tiny bottle, this random act from a stranger thousands of miles away, to him felt like a lifeline. Later, he said it gave him hope, a kind of sign that maybe things could be better. Eventually, he and his family, or his brother anyway, made it to Thailand, where they ended up in a refugee camp. And that dollar, he used it to buy an aerogram, which at the time was a thin sheet of paper that you could fold into an envelope. And he wrote back to the Peckhams, and he told them his story and how he found their bottle while fleeing Vietnam and how much it meant to him and how it gave him strength during one of the darkest moments of his life. And when that letter arrived in Los Angeles on John's birthday, the Peckhams were stunned. It wasn't just the timing, it was the sheer improbability of it all.
Yeah.
Dorothy's little note written on a whim had traveled nearly 9,000 miles to find this guy in a rickety reed boat in the middle of the Gulf of Thailand. Over the next couple of years, Dorothy and John kept writing with him. They wrote back and forth. They learned about his life in the refugee camp, his struggles, and even his joys, like when he got married in camp. They celebrated with him from afar and even sent him some money to help with his wife and their first child. And they named their baby John after John. But life in the camp was not easy. It was rough. And Ho's letters eventually included a desperate plea. Could you please help us get our family to the United States? And the Peckhams didn't hesitate. They worked tirelessly. They navigated all the complicated immigration papers in the process, reaching out to organizations for support, doing everything they could to bring this family to America. And finally, in 1985, it happened. He and his wife and their 2 children arrived in Los Angeles. Dorothy and John were there at the airport waiting to meet them.
Aww.
And when they finally saw each other for the first time, it was overwhelming. There were tears, there were hugs, so much gratitude. I can't even think about it. I can't even imagine. They'd been corresponding for years. That in and of itself was kind of remarkable, because what are the odds that that bottle would find its way to this guy and his family? And here they are, years later, face to face. And it didn't stop there. A few months later, Ho's wife had another baby, a little girl, and they named her Dorothy, after the woman who tossed the bottle into the ocean all those years ago. Their bond became something truly special, a friendship that started with a message in a bottle, and it grew into something that spanned oceans and cultures. Ho's family found stability and hope in their new life, and the Peckhams got to witness firsthand how one small act like this could turn into an act of kindness that ripples out and creates really something pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
And the story isn't just about chance or coincidence. It's about how even the smallest gestures can connect in ways that we never would ever expect.
Yeah.
Dorothy and John's kindness, Ho's family's resilience, and the sheer unlikelihood of any of this happening remind us that hope can travel great distances, sometimes in a bottle, sometimes in a letter, but always inside of people who truly care about their fellow man. I got this story from the BBC and the Los Angeles Times, and from what I understand, Ho passed away in Florida like in 2016, I think, something like that. So that's a better way than, hey, I'm on the Titanic and my feet are cold.
Yeah. Much nicer story. Thank you for that.